Om Jnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakha Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna everyone. So we'll begin with our slightly smaller than usual class today. I'll share my screen. Can we all see my screen? Okay, Jai. So we're going to be continuing today our discussion of chapter 9, and I think hopefully we will be concluding chapter 9, maybe beginning chapter 10. Because we missed out on last weekend for Shravanam, Kirtanam, not really, more for the public holiday, but because we missed out for that, we'll just do a quick recap. Let's see, because there's a small amount of people, this will be a tiny bit of pressure. But who can recall what we've covered so far in chapter 9? What's everyone's retention been of the content so far? Whoa, at the very least, to begin with, can anyone explain the name of the chapter to me?
The most confidential knowledge?
Yes, the most confidential knowledge. And what does that mean? What does that entail? What does it entail for this chapter to be the most confidential knowledge?
Like it's a secret, like it's hidden.
Yes, it's hidden, it's valuable, it's very, very high, right? What we've been discussing has all been confidential knowledge. However, this is the most confidential knowledge, Raja Guhyam. So then, what is this highest knowledge? What is the main thrust of this chapter? We've been discussing it as we've been going through. If this chapter is about this most confidential knowledge, then what is the thrust of it? What is this chapter about?
I might be wrong, but from like what I vaguely remember is that it's a conversation between, Krishna telling Arjun about how those who are like not faithful to the devotional service would return to like the path of birth and death, or basically it was about faith and devotional service is what I remember.
Yes. So we heard it contrasted, right? So we had this most confidential knowledge contrasted against other processes, against other methods. But the central concern, the central thing which is emphasized in this chapter is Ananya Bhakti, pure, unalloyed devotion, right? This is the most confidential knowledge, right? And therefore we have it contrasted against other forms of yoga, even other forms of bhakti, right? The first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gītā are almost entirely there for one singular purpose. And that singular purpose is to convince one to take up to bhakti, right? We might remember how the 6th chapter ends. The 6th chapter ends with Krishna saying, there is this and there is that, but above all, just be a devotee. This is the highest method, right? But then chapters 7 to 9 now, right, which continue on from that theme, have told us that yes, become a devotee, but above all, become a pure devotee. And so we're hearing about these mixed processes, we're hearing about these mixed destinations, but ultimately we are hearing about the heights of pure bhakti. And that's what this 9th chapter is all about, okay? This 9th chapter is emphasizing that. And when the 9th chapter discusses other forms of engaging with the Lord, other conceptions and variations on bhakti, it discusses them only in order to emphasize the power and efficacy of this pure bhakti. And therefore, we discussed all of these different things, right? Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors, so on and so forth, right? We discussed all of these principles. Where one wishes to go is where one will go. Krishna is ultimately very, very fair, right? Which is the text in chapter 4 that I'm always citing, right? There's one central text by which we can understand all of this philosophy by. Who can tell me? I quote it every time. It begins with ye, ye. Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam tathaiva bhajamyaham, right? In however somebody approaches me, in that way I reciprocate. And so Krishna naturally is reciprocating in all the different directions that worshippers come to him with, right? Those who worship the demigods, he will reciprocate by giving them birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors, he will reciprocate by letting them go to the ancestors. Those who worship spirits and ghosts, they will take birth among those beings. But those who worship Krishna, they will come to attain him, right? This is the principle. So we've been discussing like this whole chapter. So then let us continue. Does anyone remember where we left off? We left off right after Bhaktram Pushpam Halam Tuyam. And just as a slight note for shloka memorization, the p is pronounced p, it's not a f. Often people say Bhaktram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, but that's Hindi, not Sanskrit. In Hindi, we say phalam, phal, like this, but in Sanskrit, we say p. So for those of you memorizing, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, Yo me bhaktya prayachati. And so we discussed the pastime of Sudama Brahman and all sorts of things. But then let us continue on. This wasn't technically where we left off, but we'll discuss it anyways. I'll say the Sanskrit, and then maybe then Damini can read out the English. Yat karoshi yat dashnasi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kauteya tat kurushva madarpanam.
Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you give, offer or give away, and whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me.
Jai. So what we've heard here is Krishna, he is continuing on this principle, which we have heard again in the previous text, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam, right? Krishna here, he's talking about the methodology of pure bhakti. He's talking about the methodology of bhakti and devotional service, right? And he's saying, offer me this, this, and this, and I will accept it. Again, I made this point a fortnight ago, but I'll make the point again. A leaf, a flower, a fruit, or some water. He does not say, offer me leaves, offer me flowers, offer me fruits. Just simply this, something very simple, just one, just some water, just a fruit, and this will be satisfactory. This I will accept it. So this is a principle of pure bhakti. We take what Krishna wants and we give it to Krishna. But this is, in one sense, very, very high. And so Krishna then, he also explains a more accessible form of offering, right? And what is that? Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. This is no longer pure bhakti. Can anyone tell me why? Why is this no longer pure bhakti?
Because there is no word bhakti in this one. Like how in 26 we have bhakti.
Yes.
But in this verse, there is no word of bhakti. Krishna doesn't put bhakti in this here, in the verse.
That is a good, sorry?
Yes, Prabhuji, that's what I was thinking, that there's no word bhakti like that in this verse.
That is a good point. And we find that in Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, Krishna, he mentions bhakti twice. Bhaktya and bhaktyupahritam, right? Twice he's mentioned bhakti. Normally in Sanskrit, it's considered bad Sanskrit to repeat a word twice in one verse. It's considered bad Sanskrit form. Repetitive. Even in English, right? If you use a word too many times, it starts sounding dull, right? You don't want to use the same word twice. However, we would consider this, in this case, to be a specific ornament. Krishna, he is emphasizing bhakti. This is the height of bhakti. He is using even what we would consider bad poetic form in order to emphasize bhakti, bhakti. This is bhakti. And yet we don't find in text 27 bhakti being mentioned at all. And yet, text 27, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, just offer it to me, O Arjuna. That is still bhakti, right? So you're very correct, Mataji, to point out that bhakti is not mentioned, right? Because this is not as high or pure a form of bhakti. This is not as high or pure a form of bhakti, but it still is nevertheless bhakti. So how do we distinguish what is being mentioned here in text 27 from that which we have just discussed in text 26? How do we distinguish patram pushpam pahlam toyam from yat karoshi yad ashnasi? Does anyone else have any ideas? Mataji has pointed out something very important for us. But why is Krishna not mentioning bhakti here, even though this is bhakti?
Because here, right, I think we are just doing, and later on we're offering to Krishna, like we are doing the things we want to do, like, and we're not doing like, the consciousness is not that, Krishna, the consciousness is, okay, I want to do this, but in the end I'll offer to Krishna, like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, right? So with patram pushpam phalam toyam, you're taking the fruit, you're taking the leaf, and you're thinking this will be a wonderful offering for Krishna. From the beginning to the end, you're thinking about Krishna, right? From the beginning to the end, Krishna is the center of the meditation, right? You're thinking, I want to do something for Krishna, and therefore I offer this for Krishna. In this text, what is Krishna saying? Whatever you do, whatever you eat, right? He's making it more accessible in a sense, right? He's making it more inherently easy, right? Whatever you do, simply whatever, come to bhakti. And we'll find that this has a significant import for what is discussed at the conclusion of this 9th chapter, because the rest of this chapter is simply a glorification of bhakti. Okay? But, so Krishna here, he's saying, even if one is not at the platform of simply taking a plant, right? Of simply taking a fruit, simply taking a leaf, if one is not on that platform, still, whatever you do, offer it to me. This is the power, the efficacy of bhakti. You can try and offer anything. Now, what's interesting is Krishna doesn't say he'll accept it. This text doesn't say, I will accept whatever you offer, right? He doesn't say, oh, just do whatever and I will accept it, right? Bhakti is powerful, but bhakti is not so cheap, right? And bhakti is very specific. In bhakti, we move from the universal and we move to the specific. And we'll discuss this very soon as we keep on going in concluding this chapter. So, as we keep on going, we'll understand this, right? Krishna, he says, do it anyways, right? Why? Because simply by the act of giving up what you have for Krishna, you will train yourself up, right? Even if Krishna doesn't accept it, right? Even if you say, oh, Krishna, I sacrifice to you, whatever, my PlayStation or something, right? Krishna won't really care all too much about it. But still, it trains one up in the act of service to Krishna, right? So therefore, Krishna, he's speaking this. This is acting in a way to speak that anyone can engage in bhakti, right? Anyone can engage in it somehow, because still, this is bhakti, right? In one sense, it's karma yoga, right? Our acharyas, they speak differently, but I want to stress this as, in one sense, being devotional, right? Because again, it trains one in order to be able to reach the point of patram pushpam phalam toyam. Krishna has spoken this because a natural question will come, what if I am not ready to simply offer like that? And then we come to text 28. Maybe we can have Rohan Prabhu can say the English after I've said the Sanskrit.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, just one
Yes.
question, Prabhuji. So
Yes,
in
ma'am.
this, Prabhuji, in bhakti, just that we do like what pleases Krishna. Like whatever we do, we should make sure that it pleases Krishna, not like, okay, I'm just doing okay because I want to do it like that. Like
Yes.
service or something. Yeah? Yes, Prabhuji, is that
Yes.
right? Okay.
That's right. And therefore, we find sometimes the distinction is made. In Nishkama Karma Yoga, in Buddhi Yoga, we take the fruits of our actions and we offer them to Krishna, right?
Mhm.
And we even surrender the action itself, right? So in Buddhi Yoga, we have surrendered our karma, right? We offer our work itself to Krishna. But in bhakti, we offer ourselves to Krishna.
Yeah.
There is
So Prabhuji,
yes.
yeah, and how do we do this practice? Sorry, Prabhuji, like just in practical, right? When we do our chanting, like when we read and also, how do we apply this, Prabhuji? Like, can we think that, okay, because, generally we chant because, everybody thinks that we want to go back to Krishna. I don't think that way, but what our mood should be when we're chanting or when we're doing a service or doing Bhagavatam reading, Prabhuji? What should our mood be then?
His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he says, when we chant, we should chant for the pleasure of Mahaprabhu. We should chant for the pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? So when we chant, actually, this is at the beginning, we say, come chant, you'll have a nice time, you'll have a fun time. Yes. Come chant, you'll enjoy yourself, right? Come along, it's a good time. Have this prasad, yummy, yummy, right? This is how we speak at the very, very beginning level. But when we go a little deeper, we should understand that actually everything we're doing a service. We are honoring the prasadam. It is service, right? We are chanting. Why? Because it is pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as we go deeper into that service mood, interestingly enough, the less we think about our pleasure, the more fun it becomes. The kirtan becomes deeper when our meditation is, I am singing this very sweetly so that Krishna will dance, so that Srimati Radharani will dance while I chant, right? And actually, this is considered the mercy of the spiritual master, because it's very, very difficult to meditate like this. It's very difficult to think, I am right now chanting for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pleasure. But it's very simple when we're chanting 16 rounds to think, my spiritual master has told me, my guru has told me, chant 16 rounds, right? Now I am chanting 16 rounds in order to please my guru. I am reading Srimad Bhagavatam because I'm trying to please my guru. I'm doing this as service. Right? So the answer always is service to the Vaishnavas, service to the devotees. Okay? That's how we go deeper into this mood. We can go into this mood of service by thinking what I am doing, all that I'm doing is service to the Vaishnavas. Actually, I was talking to one of my friends who's a brahmachari, and he told me his spiritual master told him, if one reads Srimad Bhagavatam simply to learn the knowledge from it, he is engaged in sense gratification and is not engaged in bhakti. However, if one reads Srimad Bhagavatam in order to serve better the Vaishnavas, thinking I will learn something so I can please the devotees by sharing this knowledge with the devotees, right? If they're thinking I'm reading because my spiritual master has told me to learn from the Srimad Bhagavatam, then one is reading Srimad Bhagavatam devotionally. A very high standard. As I've been emphasizing in this section of Bhagavad-gītā, bhakti is very simple and it is also very difficult. This is the paradox of bhakti. So accessible, but such a high standard as well. So not to scare you too much, but does that answer your question?
Yes, Prabhuji. Can you repeat this about Bhagavatam, Prabhuji? Again, I heard it that you read Bhagavatam. If you read to get knowledge, it is sense gratification. But if you read knowing, no, I can learn this and I can serve the Vaishnavas. That should be the mood, right, Prabhuji?
Yes.
That should be.
We should be studying Srimad Bhagavatam because we're thinking, my guru has told me I should learn from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is why we should be studying Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad-gītā. This applies to all shastras. Right?
Okay.
But yeah, even this Bhakti-śāstrī, ideally we should be thinking that way. However, in the same way that we tell people, come chant, it's a good time, you'll like the music, you'll like the food, right? In the same way that we say that, we can also say that about studying the book. This is the highest philosophy, come learn this philosophy. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about the goal of pure bhakti, right?
Pure bhakti, that's so nice, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we should be aiming towards. But don't feel guilty if you feel some other motivation creeping in, okay? But we should be aspiring for this. Yeah.
Aspiring, yes, Prabhuji. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It's like really very nice. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Okay. No, thank you for the question. It's a very relevant question. Okay. Okay, so maybe Rohan Prabhu can say the English after I've said the Sanskrit. Shubha Shubha Phalayar Evam Mokshya Se Karma Bandhanaihi Sannyasa Yoga Yuktatma Vimukto Mam Upaishyasi.
In this way, you will be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. With your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and come to me.
Right? So now we're hearing what is the result of this activity, right? What is the consequence, right, of such devotion? What we are hearing is hearing you'll be free from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results, right? Now, there's two things that I wish to emphasize here. Firstly, free from inauspicious results. This is very attractive, but also free from auspicious results. Oh, what's going on here? Does anyone want to comment? Does anyone have an idea? What are we meaning by being free from even auspicious results?
Prabhu, does it mean that it clears all our karmas, good or bad?
Yes, it means that. But why? Why is that a goal? Why is Krishna saying this in such a nice way? He's saying this is the wonderful fruit, right? Why is he saying Shubha Shubha, right?
So that we don't take
one second, I'll just. So that we don't?
So that we don't have our rebirth?
Yes, right? Because having good karma, sometimes people will think, this is good karma, therefore I will do it, right? We are not concerned with good karma or bad karma, right? We want no karma, we want akarma, right? Remember, this is maybe going back to the earlier chapters of Bhagavad-gītā. What are the three types of work? There is karma, there is vikarma, and what is the final one?
Akarma.
Akarma, right? So we don't want good reactions. We don't want bad reactions. We want to be transcendentally situated. And therefore, we find again, this principle is mentioned here. Shubha, Shubha, right? So sometimes people will say, oh, I'm taking up to Krishna consciousness because I want to be a good person. I very much like this temple. I like going to Sri Sri Radha Gopinath Mandir. I like going there. Why? Because when I go there, it lets me be a good person, right? I'm doing the right thing. And that's very well and good. We don't want to discourage people who have such a mindset. But we are not concerned with doing the right thing, right? We are not concerned with that, at least on the material platform. We are not concerned with all of these things. We are concerned with becoming fixed upon the Supreme Lord, right? In this principle of renunciation. That is what we are concerned with. Because ultimately, that is the best thing. Ultimately, that is the highest platform, right? Actually, none of our history makes sense if we think that we are simply concerned with doing the right thing, right? Haridas Thakur, everywhere he went, he would be beaten onto the verge of death, right? This doesn't happen if you're simply there to tell people to pay their taxes and smile, right? If you're telling people to do these things, this wouldn't happen, right? We find the Goswamis, they lost all of their status in society, right? This does not happen if you're simply playing a nice role in society. Actually, this Krishna consciousness movement is very offensive. It is deeply offensive. It is deeply offensive to the material nature, even in its positive sense, right? Of course, I'm not saying that we are offensive in the sense that we are rude, or offensive in the sense that we are angry, but we are deeply, deeply violent. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, right? I have come and I'm killing all of the demonic tendencies. How? By this chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. There is a deep violence to this Krishna consciousness. And what is that violence? That violence is take your good works, take your bad works. I am not concerned with either of them. I am simply concerned with your growth in love for Godhead. And therefore we find so much transgression, right? In the Ratha Yatra, which we are all waiting for now. What happens? We find there are low caste people who are carrying Jagannath. And the king of Orissa, the most highborn person, he is sweeping the street, right? This is bhakti, and it is very offensive to societal standards. We find in our parampara, there are many Shudras who are initiating Brahmins, right? Low caste, people of low birth are giving initiation to people of the highest birth. This is very violent to social understanding. This is very violent to piety, right? What are we finding? Haridas Thakur, he is not being allowed into the temple to have darshan of Jagannath, right? He is not allowed. This is established, organized religion. And what is it saying? It's saying go away, right? And what do we find in response? Bhakti-siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that Haridas Thakur ended up having the highest mercy. Indirectly. This is violence to systems, to societal organization. All of this is burnt away, right? Traditionally, when Babaji Vesh would be taken, they would cut off their Brahmin's thread and they would throw it into the river. This is violence to systems. This is violence, and this is offense, right, to institutions and systems. This is bhakti in its highest form. Bhakti takes all of these things and it throws them all away. This is bhakti. Freedom from good karma and bad karma. Now that doesn't mean, again, that we act inappropriately. And we're going to discuss that further as we go deeper and deeper into this conclusion of this chapter. But I want to make that point. We are not concerned with good karma and bad karma. Rohan Prabhu has raised a hand.
Sorry, I just had a question.
Yes, for sure.
So it's saying that we should be freed from the auspicious results, but is this talking about like the heavenly planets? Because for a devotee, isn't like the auspicious results being taken birth into like a devotee family, aristocratic family? So is that a bad thing as well?
So that's a great question. So the devotee who takes birth in the aristocratic family is the devotee who hasn't completed his yoga process, right? So yeah, in one sense that is a bad thing, because if he did complete his yogic process, he wouldn't have taken birth in an aristocratic family, right? If we think about the context of those verses, Arjuna, he's wondering, he's thinking, what happens if I don't succeed, right? So on the one hand, we're saying that that's still a nice result, right? But that still is an unsuccessful result. So it's birth in heavenly planets, even birth in a pious family. Ideally, you want to take birth where Krishna is manifesting his pastimes, right? That's the only ideal birth. Any other birth is unideal, right? Only that birth is ideal. And in one sense, that is the most auspicious birth, right? But in the sense that we're using it here, when we speak of Shubha Shubh, this means material one, because if we're talking about transcendental auspiciousness, that there is no such thing as transcendental inauspiciousness, right? But being put together, if we're hearing both auspiciousness and inauspiciousness, that means that we're hearing the material dualities. But yeah, that applies even to those things, because again, that's the destination of the yogi who has not been successful in his yoga process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So we are hearing this, okay? So be transcendental, we have that principle. Now, we have another principle, right? Which is when one engages in karma yoga, right? When one engages in nishkama karma yoga, they transcend all fruitive reactions, right? And when one engages in jnana yoga, what is the result? What can one get from jnana yoga, Who can tell me? What is the result? You're engaged in Jnana Yoga. You're engaged in all this meditation. You're engaged in all of this. What is the result? Who can tell me? Some of you will have to have retained this. We've covered this already. This is in the first 6 chapters of Gita. What is the result of Jnana Yoga?
Knowledge, right?
Yes, it's knowledge, but where does that knowledge lead you? What is the destiny? Sorry?
Towards bhakti.
Towards bhakti, yes, in sense of the yoga ladder. But what can you achieve? There is a certain thing you can achieve.
Union with Brahman.
Yes,
The
there we go.
impersonal-
Liberation, right? Impersonal liberation is available to the Jnana Yogi, right? So what do we find? On the karma yoga path, one can be transcendent to the reactions of karma, auspiciousness and inauspiciousness. And on the Jnana Yoga path, beyond that, one can attain liberation. What does Krishna say here? In this way, you'll be freed from bondage to work and its auspicious and inauspicious results. With your mind fixed upon this principle of renunciation, you will be liberated. And then you will come to me, right? So we're finding here again the glory of bhakti, right? All of the other things that have already been discussed, all of these fruits are found here in bhakti. Does this make sense? Simply just take up to bhakti. Again, we've discussed the whole yoga ladder, not so that people can figure out where they are on it, but so that they can realize that I don't need any of this. I can simply take to bhakti. And this is the point again that Krishna is making while discussing, right? This most confidential secret. Does that make sense? So then let's go on to text 29. So maybe we can have Alex Prabhu can say the English for text 29. Samoham sarva bhuteshu na me dveshyosti na priyaha ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham.
I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him.
Jai. So here we find a continuation. And we find a certain question that can naturally be brought up. Krishna has spent so much time emphasizing, I am very, very impartial, right? Again, what is the verse? I've already asked you all once before. What is the text that I've been stressing so much that relates to how Krishna relates to the world? What is it? Chapter 4, text 11. Who can tell me? Text 4:11. Oh, somebody said in the chat. Ye yatha mam prapadyante, right? We find this principle. Ye yatha mam prapadyante. I'm equal to everyone, right? And so, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, right? One may question here that if Krishna is equal to everyone and no one is a special friend, then why does he take special interest in the devotees who are always engaged in his transcendental service, right? Krishna, he keeps on saying, I am neutral to all. I am equal to all, right? Sometimes Krishna, he's compared to the rain, right? In the sense that Krishna, he's giving out mercy everywhere. And some people are taking the mercy of the rain and producing some fruit, and others are producing different types of fruits, right? So Krishna, he is like this. He's completely impartial. And he's been stressing this the whole time. Simply by the method by which you approach me, in that method I reciprocate, right? Krishna, he has been saying this the whole time. But it really seems like Krishna favors the devotees, right? It really, really does seem that way. Krishna, he's speaking about it right now. When he's mentioning any other process, he's mentioning it in order to mention how much better devotion is than that, right? So Krishna really does seem to be rather biased. And rather sweetly, I find Krishna, he starts protesting this one more time, and yet he completely then contradicts himself and reveals the actual play at hand, right? He says, I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone, right? Again, what does this remind us of? Envy, partiality, raga, dvesha, right? Do we remember this text? Raga, dvesha. What does raga mean? Raga means attachment, and dvesha means aversion or dislike, right? So again, we were speaking about the standard dualities, right? And the standard duality of the material world is I like, I do not like. I like, I do not like, right? This is what the mind is doing all the time. Our mind, it sees things and it says, ooh, I like, ooh, I don't like. I like, I don't like, I like, I don't like. This is the nature of material reality. And Krishna has been emphasizing, I'm not engaging in material reality, right? And therefore, I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. There is no dislike and there is no like, right? I'm completely neutral. I am equal to all, right? Krishna is saying this, but then Krishna says something very sweet. What does he say? He says, but even though I'm neutral to all, those who surrender service unto me in devotion, they are my friend. They are in me, and I am also a friend to them, right? Krishna, he has revealed his hand. He has said this whole time, I'm very, very neutral, but now he has revealed that Krishna is very, very unneutral. Krishna is not a very neutral personality. Krishna is not somebody who is neutral and favorable to all. Krishna is that personality who is totally engaged in worship of his devotees. This is the nature of Krishna. Krishna is not neutral. Krishna is revealed, even though I say I'm neutral, and even though I'm neutral a lot of the time, actually, I'm truly not neutral. I'm deeply, deeply favored and biased purely to my pure devotees. So this is what Krishna says here. And this reveals a lot of deep principles. We're going to spend a tiny bit of time discussing this text. Firstly, I want to emphasize that even though we can understand this as Krishna revealing his hand, right? Revealing his play, I also want to emphasize that sometimes different commentators will split this text in two. Oh, that's way too thick. We'll split this text into, okay, two halves. We have the first half here, and obviously we have the second half here, right? This first half is Krishna speaking as the Paramatma, the super soul in everyone's heart, right? So in this first half, who is speaking? That Paramatma who views everything, you know, the God, if you will. And he is very neutral, right? He is very impartial. So here on this side, we have Paramatma, okay? But on this side here, who do we have? If we have Paramatma on the one side, on this side we have Bhagavan, okay? On this side, we have Krishna, right? The individual. So on this half, on this beginning starting point of the text, it's the Paramatma, that impartial Paramatma who's dishing out everyone's karma. He is the one speaking here. But at the point of but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, and I am also a friend to him. This is Bhagavan. This is Krishna speaking. So this is one way that commentators have sought to, to reconcile the very explicit contradiction. It's not even a slight contradiction. Krishna has contradicted himself right immediately within this text. But it speaks to a general principle, right? And what is that principle? That principle is that of partiality. Because partiality is very, very important in our spiritual lives. we sometimes think, oh, to be impartial is to be spiritual, right? But this is not the case. Alex has asked a question. Krishna wants to be friends with everyone, though. Actually, no. And we'll come to that point a little bit later. Krishna actually does not want to become friends with everyone. This is a very complicated point, because on the one hand, he does seem to, and Prabhupada does say that at times, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to, which our acharyas also mentioned. We'll discuss that point a little bit further on as we delve into it. It's not as, it sounds a little heartless. People often don't like to hear that, but when you understand the philosophy, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's actually just making a very nuanced philosophical point when we say that Krishna does not want to be friends with everyone. Being equally disposed to everyone doesn't automatically mean, well, obviously doesn't, right? Because being equally disposed to everyone, as we've discussed, is yatha mam prapadyante, right? Krishna is simply reciprocating the mood that everyone is approaching him with, right? That is what being equally disposed means, right? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he makes this point that if Krishna changes the way he behaves based on who the individual person is, then there is a change in Krishna. And if there is a change in Krishna, then Krishna is no longer God, right? Because God is unchanging, right? He is moved, but he is unchanging. Again, very technical philosophy. I've lost half the class by making that distinction. But yes, so, but does Krishna want to be friends with everyone? No, he doesn't. And we will discuss that as we go deeper into this text. So we find here, though, a very specific and important spiritual principle, and that is the one of partiality, okay? Now, partiality is something that we almost want to root out. We find that it's a spiritual principle not to be partial to anyone, right? We are equal to everyone and everything is all the same to us, right? And this is true. However, partiality in another sense is the heart of our spiritual life. To be partial is in fact the essence of our bhakti. We are hearing that bhakti is the highest and the most supreme thing, right? But what is bhakti besides being partial, besides being preferential, right? If we have bhakti to Krishna, we are having partiality to Krishna, right? And in order to have bhakti, one must have partiality. Nobody has bhakti to all the forms of the Supreme Lord indiscriminately. Of course, one who loves Krishna will naturally love the other forms of the Lord. It is not that Krishna bhaktas are out there feeling revolted at the form of Ramchandra, right? It is not that devotees of Ram are out there feeling revolted at the form of Varahadev. But on the other hand, they are not feeling that same flow of love, right? That flow of love is different. One has a specific form. One has an Ishtadev. I think we've discussed this concept of the Ishtadev before, right? The Ishtadev is that particular form for whom one's bhakti is directed, right? And we find, again, this is a principle that comes up regularly. We find this in the pastimes of Mahaprabhu, right? Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, they have a brother, right? And who is their brother devoted to? Does anyone know who is the Ishtadev of their brother? Their Ishtadev is Lord Ramchandra, or his Ishtadev is Lord Ramchandra. And so one day, Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis, right? Great scholars, great acharyas, they sit down and they convince him, look, the Shastras are so clear, right? The Vedic literature is so clear. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ramchandra is an incarnation of Krishna. Look how clear the Vedic literature is. And he sees it, right? And he acknowledges it. And he says, this is true, right? So they all come together and they make a vow. And what is their vow? Their vow is that we will therefore exclusively worship Krishna, because Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. And yet what happens? On the first night of this vow, this younger brother, Anupama, he's he begins to weep. And he begins to weep and weep and weep. And what does he weep? He weeps that surely I will give up my life, right? Because I cannot let go of worship of Lord Ramchandra. I love Lord Ram too much. I understand this philosophy that Krishna is the Supreme Personality, but I'm too attached to my worship of Lord Ram. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this, did he chastise him? Did he say, this is incorrect, this is inappropriate? No, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he said, what are the glories of the Lord who will not abandon his devotee? And what are the glories of the devotee who will not abandon his Lord? So we find here partiality is a spiritual principle. Material partiality is a material principle, but spiritual partiality is a spiritual one. And therefore, again, we find the Ishtadev is a recurring principle. When Mahaprabhu would travel through South India, for those whose faith was not so strong, he would change their conception, right? We can think of, I'm forgetting now his first name, but the Bhattacharya, right? Venkata Bhatta, right? That's his name. Venkata Bhatta, right, was a great devotee of Lakshmi Narayan, right? And yet Mahaprabhu, he went and he changed his understanding and he made him a devotee of Krishna, right? Because his devotion to Lakshmi Narayan was not fully situated. His partiality was not a fully inherently concrete spiritual one, right? And because of that, Mahaprabhu, he went, and when he stayed at the house of Venkata Bhatta, what did he do? He joked around with him. And by his joking, he convinced him that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? But on the other hand, Mahaprabhu ran into a devotee of Ramchandra, another devotee of Lord Ram, Ramdas Vipra, right? And we know this is a famous pastime. This devotee, he couldn't even honor prasad, right? Because he would lament to Mahaprabhu. He would say, how can I honor prasad? Sita has been kidnapped. And because Sita has been kidnapped, how can we honor prasad? I'm in a moment of complete anxiety, right? And what does Mahaprabhu do? Again, does Mahaprabhu say, no, become a devotee of Krishna and then you won't be lamenting? Or rather, you'll be lamenting for whole other reasons, right? No, what he says is he goes along and he worships and acknowledges the beauty of the devotion. This devotee is so absorbed in the pastimes of Lord Ram that he cannot even honor prasad, right? Again, this is the attitude towards partiality. We acknowledge and we worship partiality when it is spiritual, but when it is material, we smash it, right? So partiality is a very, very important principle. Even Mahaprabhu, he is embodying everything that we want to be as devotees, right? Mahaprabhu, he is showing the perfection of devotion. And yet Mahaprabhu, he was also very, very specific. Does anyone know who the specific form of the Lord that Mahaprabhu worshipped was? Who was the one that Mahaprabhu had a strong level of bias towards? Does anyone know? It's Krishna, but it's a specific form of Krishna.
I'm going to guess Jagannath.
Yes, you would guess correctly, right? So Mahaprabhu Mahaprabhu was completely infatuated by Jagannath, right? Mrugank Prabhu will laugh at me mentioning the famous Mangala Charan from Chaitanya Charitamrita. When we hear about Mahaprabhu dancing in front during the Ratha Yatra, Krishna Das Kaviraj Thakur, he glorifies it. And how does he glorify it? He says that the whole universe was absorbed in the dancing of Mahaprabhu. But not only was the whole universe engaged in the dancing of Mahaprabhu, so was the Nath, the Lord of the universe. Of course, Jagannath means Jagat Nath, the Lord of the universe, right? So not only was the whole universe, but the universe's Lord was absorbed in the dancing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so therefore we find they have a very special relationship. When Mahaprabhu traveled to South India, he went to Sri Rangam, right? And we know Sri Rangam has Ranganath, right? A great murti, a very worshipable murti, right? So many great devotees have gone there and had darshan of this beautiful form of the Lord. But one interesting thing you'll find is that behind the temple, there's another set of deities. It's another temple near this temple. And those set of deities are, oh, I'm seeing the chat's going off. Yeah. So the word juggernaught came from British people mispronouncing Jagannath. That's the etymology of the word, which is interesting. Yeah. But what happens is behind this temple, there are deities of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And these deities were carved by Mahaprabhu himself, and he brought them on his South India trip, right? Now we might wonder, this is very peculiar, right? Because Mahaprabhu, he's about to have darshan of all of these beautiful deities who've been worshipped by such great devotees for so long, right? These are bona fide deities. These are beautiful deities, right? And yet Mahaprabhu, what does he do? He brings Jagannath with him. He makes another Jagannath deity so he can continue worshipping Jagannath. Why is this? Because partiality is spiritual. And Mahaprabhu is very partial to Jagannath. So partiality is very, very much a spiritual principle. Partiality is very important. What is not a spiritual principle is material partiality, right? When one says, I like to do this more than this because I like it more. It gives me more sense gratification. I dislike this person because this person is black and I only like white people, right? Or vice versa, right? If we're saying this is not what we mean by spiritual partiality, right? The KKK is not very high up in spiritual progress, okay? They're very, very low, as a matter of fact. We must distinguish material partiality from spiritual partiality. But spiritual partiality, again, is the heart of our bhakti, because love has flavor. We do not love indiscriminately. We love because of specific qualities, because of specific features, right? Our bhakti flourishes because we see Krishna with his beautiful shams on the skin and his peacock feather, and he's playing his flute and he's dancing. And all of these specific details make us grow in our bhakti, right? This is partiality. We are partial towards that little blue boy. And because of that, we grow in our bhakti. Now, there's another point to be made, but I think this would be a natural point to take our 5-minute break. So we'll take our 5-minute break, and I'll see you all at 4 past 11. Okay, Hare Krishna. Is one form, I'll answer the question after the break. Jai. Okay, see my screen. Okay, I had a few questions, but I think the devotees who asked the questions aren't necessarily back, so I'll continue explaining a few points and then I'll come back to the questions then. So now continuing our discussion of this text, we find, but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend. Unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. Okay, so here we find the second dimension of this text. And what is that? But whoever renders service unto me is in me, right? Now this, I think, is a rather interesting text, and it comes to a certain point that I like to make in a critique, if you will, of impersonalism, of Mayavad. And what is that critique? Well, it's simply that the Mayavadi takes oneness to be referential to I become you, right? But in Krishna consciousness, we understand something a bit deeper. In Bhakti Yoga, we understand something much deeper. And what is that? Once we have engaged in this spiritual partiality of, oh, I am rather favorable to this, and actually I'll answer Vishakha's question then, is one form greater than the other? in terms of Krishna and Jagannath, one form is not greater than the other, but for the individual devotee, whoever one has a specific form of bhakti to, that is the greater form for that person to worship. So there's a certain level of relativity to it, right? Yeah. Does that make sense? But yeah, inherently there isn't one that's better than the other in forms, in terms of Jagannath and Krishna. In terms of like Ramchandra and Krishna, we would consider Krishna to be higher. But if one is an established devotee of Ramchandra with a full spiritual partiality, if you will, then the form of Ramchandra is superior for that person simply because they've established that relationship.
Then would they still achieve Goloka, for example?
No.
They wouldn't.
If you have a partiality towards Lord Ramchandra, Goloka will not be a nice time for you. You want to go to Ayodhya, right? You want to be in the Transcendental Ayodhya, right? Same for many people will spend their whole time, and we're going to touch on this more in Nectar of Devotion. I'm very excited for Nectar of Devotion to do this with all of you. But if people who are completely absorbed in awe and reverence, right? I love Krishna as the supreme personality. Krishna is the king of the universe. They won't go to Goloka either, right? Because Goloka will be very difficult for them, right? The king of the universe, the majestic ruler, and here's Mother Jashoda chastising him. And here, the king of the universe, the ruler of the cosmos, he's wrestling with his friends and his friends are winning. This is very, very torturous, right? If you have that sort of conception of Krishna, you won't enjoy it. So even if one has a differing mood and relationship to Krishna, you'll go to somewhere else. If you still have the awe and reverence, you go to Dwarka. You don't go to Goloka. Goloka actually is very hard to access. Goloka is very exclusive. Even in Kali Yuga, normally Goloka isn't made accessible. It's only in this Kali Yuga that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is opened up. Normally it's Vaikuntha, maybe Dwarka that's opened up. Yeah. So no, they won't go. Devotees of Lord Ramchandra don't go to Goloka. But again, for them, they wouldn't want to go to Goloka, right? This is the beauty of our conception, right? It's that everyone is an individual, right? We are all individuals, and individuals have different tastes, and the spiritual world has a corner for every taste. Okay, and then I'll answer Alex Prabhu's question as well. So, is it okay to be partial to him in more impersonal hidden leanings? Okay, so it depends what you mean by okay, right? I'm going to say, again, it depends what you mean by okay. On the one hand, it's not okay, right? Because, okay, no, let me think about this. In one hand, it's not okay because it's not that spiritual partiality I'm talking about. Spiritual partiality means you are partial to certain qualities, right? If you are partial to the impersonal Lord, that just means you are not partial to material qualities, right? To be partial to the impersonal Lord simply means you're not attached to material qualifications, right? But it doesn't mean you actually have any specific partiality or attachment to any spiritual qualifications.
So I didn't, impersonal is probably a too loaded a word in this context. Hidden is a better word. Like, Allah has no form, or, there's debates about that.
That's exactly what I'm saying though, right? So if you're talking about hidden or something like that, that's still not an actual partiality, right? Because there isn't a specific substance that's connected to, right? If that makes sense. So that's not a spiritual partiality. That's simply a rejection of material partiality. So it's good, but it's relatively good, if you get what I mean. It needs to flourish into something deeper. Interestingly, you're mentioning Allah in the Quran. Allah in the Quran is described as having hands, right? So I wouldn't even say, I would say that, the Quran's sort of starting to get there, but it's in terms of what it's revealed, right? So, but yeah, no, partiality in terms of when there's no specific features revealed is not actually a partiality. It just means you've accepted there's something transcendent, but you haven't partially latched on yet. Does that make sense? Yeah, we need to start talking about hands and flutes and all, and then we're talking partiality, right? Or if you're in the Nrsingadev Bhakta. Yeah, fun fact.
Can I say, I suppose, because in the broad Islamic tradition, there are some who really emphasize the hands and the feet and the throne, and they tend to get killed. So they probably get reborn in India in Vaishnava families.
Well, yeah. I would say so. Yeah. I would say if you're emphasizing the hands and the feet, you're doing good spiritual progress. So I can't speak on their destination, but it would be a good one. Because they make good movement. Yeah. In terms of Ishtadevs, just a little bit of trivia, I guess, for you all. Who was Prahlada Maharaja's Ishtadev?
Dev?
Sorry? That was a bit brief.
Lord Nrsimhadev?
Yes,
Lord
many people think it's Lord Nrsingadev, but
Yeah.
Srimad Bhagavatam actually says that it's Krishna. Just a little tidbit. Yeah.
For Krishna,
Sorry?
how could he? Wouldn't it be Vishnu?
What do you mean?
Like, as in, Nrsimhadev came before Krishna, right?
Yeah, but Krishna's form is still eternal. People are still worshipping Krishna. Yeah. Well, Krishna, how do I put it? Nrsingadev came before Krishna, but Krishna also came before Nrsingadev. It's all cycles, right?
It's so confusing. Okay.
It's not linear time, you know what I mean? Like Dhruv Maharaj, he goes and he meditates. Dhruv Maharaj is also in Satya Yuga before Krishna comes, right? But he meditates on the lotus footprints of Krishna. And our acharyas say the reason why he can do that is because he's meditating on the footprints that were left in the last day of Brahma. So it circles and circles and circles. Time doesn't begin, nor does it end, right? And yeah, it's a bit of a headache for us because we're so used to, there was the universe is 13 billion years old. There was a big bang and the universe will end in so and so billion years. And that's it, right? But when you have a secular view of time, it's a little counterintuitive to our sensibilities. Anyways, not really a tangent. It was relevant, but just a little bit of, I guess, getting you all hyped up to do Bhakti Vaibhav after you finish Bhakti-śāstrī. Okay, so we were talking about, but whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him, right? In impersonal conceptions, we speak about becoming one with the Lord, etc., etc. But actually, when we find our acharyas commenting on these texts, right? Me and the Lord, we have become one, right? He is in me. We will notice that they will follow Krishna's line of reasoning, because Krishna here, he has said, right? That person who renders service unto me in devotion is a friend and is in me, right? But how are they in Krishna? They're in Krishna because of devotion, right? And so we come to the point that our acharyas make. When one loves another one, right? It is not that you and I become one, but rather than you and I become we, right? This is the principle that's there. The bonds of love, even though they are created over a distance, bind two people together more strongly than the very bonds of existence binding them together. If I become you and you become me, we will not be as close as we can become if I say I love you and you love me. Because of the strength of the bond of love, of true transcendental prema, of true transcendental devotion, this bonds people together. Again, in a paradox, the distance that love requires ends up creating a bond that is stronger than the unity that impersonal meditation facilitates. Does that make sense? Have I lost anyone? Is that a bit complex? Basically, they are in Krishna. Why? Because in the bond of love, what does anyone think of? All that Krishna thinks about is his devotee. All he's thinking about is my devotee. And all that the devotee is thinking about is Krishna, right? And so they've completely emptied themselves of themselves and they fully embraced meditation of the other. And because of this, they become a we, they become a unit, right? The Srimad Bhagavatam is about what? What does this word Bhagavat mean? The Bhagavad Purana. What does this mean? What does Bhagavat mean? Runal Mataji, what do you think Bhagavat means?
Someone who's devoted to the Lord or following the principles. Maybe?
Yes. No. You got it right. Somebody who is devoted to the Lord, right? This Bhagavad Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam is what? It is the literary incarnation of Krishna. This Bhagavad Purana is Amalam Puranam, right? It is the spotless Purana. It is the Purana which teaches us the most. It is the scripture which teaches us the most about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And yet, what is it about? It's about the devotees, right? It's about the Bhagavats. It's the Bhagavad Purana, right? And so therefore, what do we find? We find that where the devotee is, the Lord is, and where the Lord is, the devotee is, because of how strong this union is. To become one with the Lord is done more powerfully when one is engaged in bhakti than when one is engaged in jnana. Because again, the bonds of love are that strong. Is the Gita also literary? Yes, it also is, but in a different sense, we can say. It's a bit of nuance, but yeah, the Gita is also, you can, if you don't have deities at home, you can offer your offerings to the Bhagavatam, for example. And yeah, your puja, you can do all of your puja offerings and everything to Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so in this way, we find that the Supreme Lord, he is completely relating to them. Now we'll come to a final point that I wish to make from this text, and then we can keep on going. And this is a point coming to Alex's question that he asked earlier. Because as I said, it's a new screen. I won't redraw it, but we'll all remember I drew the two different, right? Paramatma, it's a very straight line, Bhagavan, okay? Paramatma, Bhagavan, right? These are the two halves, okay? When we are saying that Paramatma is relating to everyone, we are also hearing then that Bhagavan, he is saying that I am relating specifically to my friends. I'm relating specifically to my devotees, right? Well, Krishna, he is saying this. The implication is that those who are not the devotees are not in Krishna, right? Because the devotees are in Krishna. So non-devotees are not in Krishna, right? So this is a little bit, okay, a little bit more complex philosophy. Please don't hate me for it. But what we'll find is that Krishna, and this is the description that's given by Jiva Goswami, and this comes back to Alex's previous question that Krishna wants everyone to become a devotee. Krishna only actually ever relates with his devotees. Krishna does not have a direct relationship with any of the non-devotees. And this is philosophically necessary because the only way, Krishna's whole reality is that of bhakti. It's that of love. And those who do not have bhakti do not appear on Krishna's radar. They do appear on the Paramatma's radar. And maybe Krishna has some awareness that they exist, but he does not actively relate to them because Krishna only actively relates to those who have bhakti. Krishna is only concerned with running around and playing games. Krishna is only concerned with relishing dance and leela and pastime with his devotees. He is only engaging with his internal energy, okay? Krishna is only doing this. So Krishna is not actually concerned with the non-devotees. And therefore, he is actually not concerned, if that doesn't sound horrific enough to our sensibilities, he is therefore also not concerned with the suffering of the spirit souls in the material world. Okay, now let me finish this point. Because again, this is philosophically necessitated by all that said. How about Balaram? A similar case with Balaram, but we'll get to the juicy point here, which will explain how all of this works. Because not only does it seem a little distasteful, it also doesn't make sense. Because why is Krishna then giving his mercy to non-devotees to make them into devotees, right? Why then is Krishna, coming in the form of Mahaprabhu and spreading the Sankirtan mission? Why are all of these things happening if we're hearing that Krishna doesn't really care, right? Because again, I want to stress, Krishna only relates with those with bhakti. Krishna only relates through bhakti and to bhakti, okay? So Krishna only relates in this way. However, and this is the distinguishing point, there's also another point that's made, but it's maybe a bit too complex philosophy for Bhakti-śāstrī. But it's generally considered that Krishna can't have compassion onto the suffering spirit souls because he hasn't experienced suffering. He does not understand what their experience is like, right? And if he were to experience suffering, that would deny his divinity. It's all a little bit complex, but we'll stick with the initial central point, which is that Krishna only relates to bhakti. However, who is Krishna relating in bhakti to? He is relating to his devotees. And his devotees do understand suffering. And his devotees do understand that there are people suffering. And his devotees do know their existence because the devotees relate also not to the Supreme Lord, but they relate to all the other spirit souls as well. And therefore, because of the understanding in the hearts of the devotees, Krishna has an understanding of the existence of the non-devotees. And Krishna therefore has compassion onto the non-devotees. And Krishna therefore wishes to spread bhakti among the non-devotees because he understands it through the heart of his devotee. Does this make sense? Have I lost you all in this philosophy? Krishna therefore feels compassion, and therefore, yes, exactly, Q Chaitanya, Krishna's devotee. But even why does Chaitanya Mahaprabhu come down? Advaita Acharya, he calls out. It's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says this. Mahaprabhu says, I've come down. Why? Because Advaita Acharya, right, the devotee of the Lord, and also Vishnu, but a little bit complicated, also Shiva, even more complicated. He is called out and he said, all of these souls are suffering, and therefore I've come down in order to spread the Sankirtan. So why does Krishna spread his mercy? Krishna does it. Why does Krishna have compassion upon the suffering souls? He has it because the devotees have that compassion. And again, therefore, we find the elevated position of the devotees. The devotees melt the heart of Krishna in order for him to give his mercy unto the spirit souls. The devotees give Krishna this understanding, and therefore the devotees, therefore sometimes the devotees are called the Kripa Shakti, the mercy potency, the mercy energy of the Lord, because that mercy is realized through the devotees. And therefore the devotees, they go around and having Bhakti Devi in their hearts, they spread around Bhakti Devi to all of the individual suffering spirit souls, and therefore they give them some mercy. So do we say that Krishna directly, he's concerned with the suffering souls? No, he's not. But indirectly, he's very concerned, right? Does this make sense? Are there any questions? It's all, again, a little bit of heavy philosophy. I'm sorry, it's just because we missed out on last week. So I'm just, normally I try and space out the heavy philosophy, but we're just doing heavy philosophy, heavy philosophical point to heavy philosophical point, just because I don't want to lose momentum. As I've told you all, Kanasham Prabhu told me very strictly, I have to finish in 2 years. So we will be finishing in 2 years. And that means we'll be going a little bit quick at times. Okay, are there any questions with that? Okay, mull over it. There's much more that can be said discussing this point, but again, I don't want to overwhelm you all too much. Alex, does that answer your question? Yeah. And therefore, we find, we can again think, what is the elevated position of the Vaishnavas, right? That's why we sing about the glory, the mercy of the Vaishnavas, right? The very mercy of Krishna flows only because the Vaishnavas' hearts are so soft. Okay, now let's go into the next text. And this is a very famous text, a very controversial text, also a text that's interpreted very differently. It's interpreted in many, many different ways. And maybe we can have, who have I asked to say texts? I haven't asked many people because we've been going very slow today. Have I asked Sri Mataji? Okay, Sri Mataji can say the English then after I say the Sanskrit. Appi chet suduracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadhur eva samantavyaha samyag vyavasito hisaha.
Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination.
And this text, I think, goes very well with the next text. So we'll add the next text as well. Maybe we can have Tanya Mataji can say the English. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvach chantim nigachati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati.
He quickly becomes righteous and attains lasting peace. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes.
Jai. Okay, so this text is very, I'm sure many of us have heard it before, right? Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. Does anyone have any thoughts or concerns from this text before we dive into it? Are there any questions surrounding it? Does anything come to anyone's mind? Okay, we'll get right into it. So this text is very famous because it's very, I don't know. I think everyone intuitively can feel in their gut that this is a text that's very ripe for abuse, right? You sort of hear this and you think, Jai Bhakti Devi, but you also think, I don't know if this is the most practical principle by which to live my life, right? And we find that if you do feel that, well, you're in good company because our acharyas very, very strongly differ in how they read these texts, okay? And you'll find a general spectrum of readings. You'll find more conservative ones and you'll find more, I don't want to say progressive, but maybe liberal ones, right? You find ones which really emphasize, no, whatever the devotee does, it's fine, Hare Krishna, right? And you'll find Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, especially, he takes his reading. And then you'll find more conservative ones. Jiva Goswami, in fact, he renders this as basically saying that the devotee will never do anything bad. And if he does, he should be absolutely rejected, right? Maybe I am speaking in hyperbole, but Jiva Goswami does take a reading more like that. So we find here there is a real tension point. And so I think we'll probably be spending a bit discussing these two texts. We'll go through a few of the different interpretations that they've had, because not only do they have that gut reaction, they're also a bit confusing, right? We're hearing about somebody who is engaging in high levels of devotion, and then we're hearing about them engaging in the most abominable actions, right? This is a contradiction in terms. We're hearing about how great the devotee is. The devotee is not going to be engaging in abominable actions. Isn't that a contradiction, right? And if they are already a devotee, then how can we hear about them later becoming righteous and attaining lasting peace, right? They're already a devotee. Why are they going onto the platform of dharmatma, right? Of embodying righteousness. Why are they again downgrading from bhakti to karma, right? There's all sorts of questions that come up in these texts. These are very, very complex texts. And I am cognizant that this is the last half-hour chunk. This is the last quarter of our lesson, and most of your brains are completely fried by now. I am cognizant of that, so I won't get into the technicalities too much. But as I said, we're going to have a little bit of a content-heavy class today, so as to not get too far behind. But yeah, just a fully heads up, this might get a little bit technical, but it is very important to understand. Now, again, we find that these two general acharyas have their respective views, okay? Let me write them up on the screen. So we have Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and we have Jiva Goswami. I want to say that these two very much embody the two ends of the spectrum, okay? You'll find different acharyas will fall into different categories. Baladev Vidyabhushan's a bit in the middle, at least from memory, etc., etc. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who we will come to later, has two readings of this text, and they're both just off the wall. Like they're very, very unique. And in my opinion, probably the ones that are easiest for us to reconcile what these texts are saying. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent now into our history, just because I think it's important to understand that our acharyas were people, are people rather. They're individuals with individual personalities, and those individual personalities bring out certain qualities, certain types of thought, right? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is being very typically Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur when he emphasizes the liberalness of this text. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is very big on emphasizing bhakti wherever he can. And not only emphasizing bhakti, but by emphasizing it in a very rasic manner. Jiva Goswami, on the other hand, is very, very famous for being very systematic, very philosophical, right? And he tends to be conservative and tries to hide the more esoteric things, okay? So for example, and this is a very rasic Chaitanya Charitamrita level topic, but we find there's the question of Swakiya Ras and Parakiya Ras. We won't discuss this too much because it's very esoteric, but in Nectar of Devotion, it'll anyways come up. Does anyone know what the difference between Swakiya Rasa is and Parakiya Rasa? So these are the two flavors of Madhurya Rasa. What is the Madhurya Rasa? Who can tell me? Krishna has several rasas by which he engages with his devotees, different flavors of love, different mellows of love. Who can tell me? What is this? What is Madhurya?
Madhurya is conjugal love?
Yes, conjugal, romantic love, right? Correct. So yes, and as Mrugank Prabhu has said, Parakiya is unmarried Madhurya love, and Swakiya is married romantic love, okay? Swakiya is when there is a marriage, and Parakiya is when there is not a marriage. So Krishna has his queens in Dwarka that he's married to. That is all Swakiya Ras, right? Because there is a married romantic love there, right? But in Parakiya, this would be Krishna and the gopis, right? Krishna is not married to the gopis, right? Okay. So again, we won't go into much further detail, otherwise I'm going to get banned from ISKCON as a teacher. We won't get into this very esoteric details. We'll save this for when you all study Chaitanya Charitamrita. But I want to make an interesting point, because Jiva Goswami, he actually rewrites, and Prabhupada mentions this in his purports, he actually rewrites the pastimes of Krishna to have Krishna marry all the gopis, so he has Swakiya Rasa with them, right? Now, this is very confusing because the whole point of Krishna's relationship with the gopis is that he's not married to them. Why has Jiva Goswami rewritten the pastime to have Krishna marry all of the gopis? Srila Prabhupada, he mentions in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Jiva Goswami does this because Jiva Goswami is very conservative, right? And Jiva Goswami, being very conservative, did not want people to get the wrong idea about Krishna. He very much wanted to hide these very high truths. And therefore, Jiva Goswami, he is presenting Krishna as marrying the gopis and then dancing with them, right? Here we can see the personality of Jiva Goswami coming out. Jiva Goswami, he is more about sheltering things. He is about being conservative. All of these sort of qualities come out more in Jiva Goswami. And therefore, it makes sense that when Jiva Goswami comments upon these texts, he is very conservative. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, on the other hand, is like the Parakiya Bhavacharya. He is out there constantly proclaiming Parakiya Bhav, unmarried love, boom, 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 all of these rasic things. He's out there just proclaiming all of them, right? And therefore, it's natural that when he interprets this text, he is interpreting it in a much more liberal manner, because he's very much speaking about how bhakti conquers all things, how bhakti is transcendental to all things. Again, we're finding their unique and individual personalities are coming out rather strongly. We should not think that our acharyas are just like these machines of truth, just giving out information, blah, 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 like that. That's not what our acharyas are. Our acharyas are individuals, they're personalities, right? Because again, what did we discuss? There's partiality in the spiritual world because you are individuals and our acharyas are individuals as well. If we don't accept that our acharyas are individuals, we become impersonalists. So there will be differences in the ways our acharyas read things because they're individuals with different qualities, with different tastes, with different flavors. Srila Prabhupada said that it's very fine to put the peacock feather in Mahaprabhu's hair. His Holiness Gaur Govinda Maharaj said that it's forbidden, right? They're different people. They have different personalities, right? Different tastes, different understandings. Okay? So, all that point, Alex, like, I hate to say you're wrong, but we have to get to Nectar of Devotion before we can get deeper into it. Okay, this is a very Nectar of Devotion topic. It's nothing to do with, it's not about material, because what you're talking about are material weddings. We're not talking about material marriages. We're talking about the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. They are two ontological different categories. You cannot compare the marriages of Krishna to the marriages that people have on earth, if that makes sense. But again, that'll come up more when we get into Nectar of Devotion, which I'm very excited to get into, by the way. Okay, with all of that, to establish what I wished to discuss, let us now get into the text itself. Then which truth can we accept? Yes, a very good question, right? So two things. One, even Prabhupada says this. I'm not saying anything controversial by saying our acharyas disagree. Again, when we read Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada literally opens up one chapter with saying it is natural that different acharyas will have different opinions. Okay, but what does Srila Prabhupada say? They have different opinions on details, but never on the principle. And we'll find this idea is pushed by all of our acharyas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I forgot now the other word. There's Paramarthik and there's Vyavaharik, I think. That's what he says. There's the essence and there's the details. The details they'll have differences on. Our acharyas do not disagree that bhakti is independent and supreme. Our acharyas do not disagree that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Our acharyas do not disagree that one should chant Hare Krishna, right? Our acharyas do not disagree that one should have some rules and regulations in the execution of our bhakti. Our acharyas do not disagree on any of this. The essential points are always the same, right? So that's one aspect, right? We have to think, which truth can we accept? Well, the essential truths are always the same, right? Now, in terms of detail, there's three different principles. One is that ideally, we all have a primary guru whose shelter we are under, right? We can ask that guru and we can, as a general rule, accept that, right? On the other hand, we also hear Srila Prabhupada says that whatever the guru says has to be backed up by Shastra, right? By scripture. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada says, we know there are three authorities. There are the saints, there's the guru, and there's scripture. But scripture is the center of these three. They are not equally valued. They're not equally authoritative. So we can also see, if we see differing takes, we can try and see which one is lining up better with the Shastras, with the scriptures, right? Because often, if it doesn't line up with the scriptures, it means it was a preaching strategy. Like Jiva Goswami. Jiva Goswami did not actually think that Krishna married all the gopis, but he's saying it as a preaching strategy in order to preserve the dignity and the sanctity of these higher truths, right? So again, so firstly, we can verify with Shastra. Secondly, we can also ask our guru for guidance, right? For which one? And lastly, I've forgotten the third one. There was a third principle. There's a third principle for doing this, and I'm now mind blanking. But basically, one can, also what one can do is one can take one acharya and they can just say, I'm just taking, this is what my godfather Hari Parshad Prabhu says to do, because he finds lots of disagreements among the acharyas. You take one acharya, you take their understanding and you just take shelter of it. You just say, I'm just going to take shelter of this acharya's readings. In ISKCON, we tend to do that by taking shelter of Srila Prabhupada's readings, right? So even though that's why sometimes people will get annoyed with ISKCON devotees, right? Because we'll hear what all these other acharyas say and we'll say, oh, but Prabhupada said this, so I'll accept this, right? We're not saying that in the sense that Prabhupada is more correct than any of the other acharyas. It's just that as a general rule of our culture, we accept Srila Prabhupada's readings as the main ones we take shelter of. That doesn't mean that inherently Srila Prabhupada's ones are better. That's just a culture of ISKCON. Yeah, so those are the three principles. One, you can take shelter of your immediate guru. Two, you cross-verify with Shastra. And three, you can take shelter of one specific acharya's understandings. Technically, there's nothing wrong with specifically taking shelter of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's understandings. I find I tend to do that. I have a lot of fondness for Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But in general, in ISKCON, yeah, as a cultural rule, almost, we take shelter of Prabhupada's understandings. Again, very complex topic. I had to bite my tongue. Like, there's so much more that can be said, but I hope that at least practically clarifies it. Yeah. The differences that are there are differences of flavor, right? No one's saying anything radically different. And if they are saying something radically different, it's a preaching strategy, which we find our acharyas do often. Bhaktivinoda Thakur at one point says that the fifth canto is all a big metaphor, right? That's a preaching strategy because all our acharyas are very clear that the fifth canto is very literally describing our cosmology. Okay, Jai. So now that we've discussed that, let us discuss something about our very controversial apichet su duracharo. Okay, so firstly, we should take into consideration that that this text is controversial among our acharyas because it comes to a central tension point we have in bhakti, and that is the controversy of antinomianism. I always misspell it, antinomianism. I hope I haven't misspelled it. So the word nomos means law, right? That's where we get economy, right? It's the laws that, anyways, whatever, right? So antinomianism is to reject laws, right? And this is a real big problem we do have in bhakti, because it sometimes gets confusing. On the one hand, bhakti is independent and supreme. Do whatever you want. We don't care about auspiciousness. We don't care about inauspiciousness. We don't care about any of these things. Just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. On the other hand, what are we hearing? Follow the 4 regulative principles. Don't eat meat, right? Don't gamble. Don't take intoxicants. Don't have illicit sex, right? We're hearing all of these different things, right? Don't eat onion and garlic, right? If you're muchi, Prabhu, don't enter into the kitchen, right? All of these sort of different things. We're hearing all of these rules. So there's a tension in bhakti. On the one hand, our philosophy is very clearly saying that bhakti burns down all the rules, etc., etc., etc. On the other hand, our philosophy also tells us that the devotees embody what bhakti means. And when they embody it by following a lot of strict rules. You know, we're fasting on Ekadashi. Chants, exactly, right? So we're hearing all of these rules and regulations. And yet we're also hearing that we are beyond all these rules and regulations, right? So this is a tension point. And it's a tension point that we're going to explore in terms of this text. We will go even deeper into it, again, in Nectar of Devotion, when we discuss Raganuga versus Vaidhi Bhakti. And I'll touch upon it a little bit because that's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur interprets these. So we'll discuss however many we have time to discuss, and then next week, or we might finish them in time. I don't know. So this is a very central tension. Okay, lots of rules, lots of regulations, right? We're not, you know, you're not taking Charanamrit with your left hand, right? That's when we really think about it, that's actually a very specific rule and regulation. And yet on the other hand, we're hearing, do whatever you want. You're a great saint. You're a great devotee, okay? So how do we understand this? Several different ways. Firstly, we should keep in mind what is the text here saying? Api chet. How does Srila Prabhupada render it? He renders it as even if one commits the most abominable action, right? What's interesting is you can also translate api chet as being even though. So I'll write that up. Even though. So in that sense, it's not saying even if, in the sense that even if they do this, it's saying even though, right? Even though one commits the most abominable action, and therefore it's discouraging, right? We can see these are the two ways by which, and then the flavor of it very much changes. Again, these are different flavors of a central truth. But we can also understand it as even though one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination, right? So we can understand this in different ways. So one of them is taking it as, yeah, maybe he does something every once in a while, but he's fine. Whereas the other way is saying, in spite of this, still we should hold some esteem for this individual. And what's interesting is this is how Srila Prabhupada explains it in his purport, right? Because he makes this distinction between conditional and constitutional activities, right? You have your essence and your accidents, if you will, right? And in this distinction, we'll find that the basic constitutional principle of the devotee is that he is a pure devotee. But conditionally, he might make some, violate some rules, right? So what do we find that Srila Prabhupada defines this as? What he says is, he says, sometimes, however, it may be seen that a person in Krishna consciousness commits some act which may be taken as most abominable socially or politically. But such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him, right? But what does Srila Prabhupada say here? Such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him, right? What is interesting? What also is here is accidental fall down. We'll find that every time a fall down is mentioned here, they're being defined as being temporal, as being accidental, right? What is meant here is not that if somebody is regularly killing people, if somebody is regularly, regularly breaking the rules, therefore they're all fine. They are not covered by this text. Srila Prabhupada and all of our acharyas make it very clear. This refers to occasional mistakes, right? This refers to occasional errors that have been performed in the execution of bhakti. This is not referring to, say, we'll see this. Some people in the history of ISKCON have done really terrible things, and they've done them repeatedly and without remorse, without repentance. They are not covered in this text. This text is referring to those who occasionally, through some issue or another, have engaged in some sort of misdeed, right? Even the most liberal readings of this text do not say that it just goes, anything's fine. It says that it only applies to that person who is remorseful, to that person who has some remorse for their action. It does not mean that a person who is constantly drinking, who is constantly doing meth and killing dolphins, right? It does not mean that that person is perpetually fine, no matter what they do. They can just go, as long as they're chanting Hare Krishna, kill all the dolphins you want. That's not what's going on here, right? What this is saying is, if somebody is genuinely remorseful and repentant, then one should be considered in that category. No matter how conservative or how liberal we read this text, either way, we should understand it to be requiring remorse, okay? Okay, so I want those principles to be established because those are relatively universal. This is occasional and this is remorseful, okay? This is occasional and this is remorseful. And actually, I'm just trying to think, because we've only got 10 minutes and 10 minutes is not enough time to delve into all of the readings of this. What I might do is I might come to, we'll go to the differences between all the readings next week, and I'll comment again on the universal principles of this text. And then next week, we'll go into the specific different commentarial takes, right? I'll leave you all hanging for how we can really understand these texts deeper. So what is understood here, again, is a very partial fall down, right? As we've discussed, in one sense, there is no such thing as a fall down. So what this is referring to is this is like a temporary hiccup, right? But what does Srila Prabhupada say? Srila Prabhupada also says something rather interesting, even about these people, right? Even if by chance or accident, he is found to have fallen, right? The words sadhur eva, he is saintly, are very emphatic. They are a warning to the non-devotees. Second, I might. Is there a highlighter here? They are a warning to the non-devotees, right? That because of an accidental fall down, a devotee should not be derided. He should still be considered saintly, even if he has accidentally fallen down. And the word mantha yatha is still more emphatic. If one does not follow this rule and derides a devotee for his accidental fall down, then one is disobeying the order of the Supreme Lord. The only qualification of a devotee is to be unflinchingly and exclusively engaged in devotional service. Okay, and then Srila Prabhupada, he quotes Shastra. And what does this text say from the Nrsimha Purana? Maybe we can have Shivam Prabhu. Would you like to just read out this translation? Yeah.
Meaning is that even if one fully engaged in the devotional service of the Lord is sometimes found engaged in abominable acts, these activities should be considered to be like the spots that resemble the mark of a rabbit on the moon. Such spots do not become an impediment to the diffusion of moonlight. Similarly, the accidental fall down of a devotee from the path of saintly character does not make him abominable.
Jai. Okay, so again, let us remember this emphasis on accidental. This does not refer to people who are regularly abusing their position, regularly doing something wrong, right? However, right, what is the point that's being made? This is a very central text because it's speaking about Vaishnava aparad. And Vaishnava aparad is something very, very serious. Again, next week, I'm going to go into a bit more detail. We're going to discuss the different types of Vaishnava aparad. There are very many different varieties of aparad, of things. Even seeing a devotee and not being happy upon seeing them is considered Vaishnava aparad. If you see a devotee and you're not happy, you do not smile, you do not rejoice among meeting a devotee, this is considered offensive. What is Vaishnava aparad? It is blasphemy to the Vaishnavas. And Krishna here is establishing the principle that this is not to be considered to be done, right? We should not criticize the devotees, right? Especially if it is one thing that they've done just once before, right? We ignore this, right? Why? Because again, they are situated on a very high platform, right? So what is the principle here? The principle again is not that somebody is constantly mistreating me, therefore I will tolerate it because they are on a saintly platform, right? The principle is this person 10 years ago ate a veggie burger with onions on it. I don't know, right? Something like that, right? He did this 10 years ago. I'm not even going to remember that. I'm not even going to retain it. Who cares, right? Right now, he is situated properly in devotion. I will not hold that against him, and I will not try to dwell on it, right? Because if one offends the devotees, again, what is the whole point of this section? This is the most confidential knowledge. This is speaking about that most confidential platform. And on that most confidential platform is the devotee. So we're hearing about the glorification of the devotee. We've heard about Krishna now basically saying that he virtually is partial to the devotees. And now what's the point he's making? I'm so partial that I will not tolerate criticism of the devotees. Again, if one is engaged in regular sinful activity, then they're not in this category, right? Too often devotees will try to excuse things and toxic atmospheres will come up because devotees will try to apply this to people who are regularly engaging in nefarious activities. Furthermore, just as a general application in ISKCON, when we are speaking as an institution, this does not mean that we can forgive somebody who does something wrong institutionally, right? Or break some sort of rules institutionally and say, oh, well, let's just ignore this because api chet sudara charaha, right? This does not mean that we can just ignore things in a management level, right? This is a personal principle. This is not a management principle. This is not a principle saying, oh, I will look past that this person has, I don't know, just at the top of my head, I'm not thinking of any specific case. This person's embezzled money or something, right? This person's shot someone, right? Therefore, they can keep their position there, right? Let's let them keep their position. Let's let them stay in management or whatever, because you know what? He's just done one bad activity. He's remorseful. No, we should still kick people out. We should still, or demote them or stuff like that. There still should be principles that ISKCON is run as a valid institution, right? What it does mean is that we shouldn't hold anything against that person if they wish to, as they continue their spiritual progress, right? These are two separate things. This is a personal principle, not an institutional principle, okay? So the basic truth is that Vaishnava aparad is very, very bad. We are not meant to criticize the devotees. In fact, in general, we shouldn't really criticize anyone. The only time criticism should come up, the only time you should be noticing faults is if it's devotees under you or if it's something related to your service, right? If it's not that, then it's none of your business, right? If it's related to you somehow, if somebody is mistreating you, then it's related to you, obviously, then you should be noticing faults, right? If it's hindering your ability to perform your services, then of course you should notice it and bring it up with the appropriate people, right? And if these are people who are under your care, you should be noticing their faults, but in a compassionate way to help them overcome their faults, right? But in Krishna consciousness, we do not dwell on the faults and mistakes, even if we consider them to be relatively bad, right? Is it aparad to bring things up? What do you mean by bring things up? Because it can be and it also can't be.
Like, let's say like a devotee doesn't treat you very well, and you wanna say something about it, like, you know, to whoever's in charge. But then by me contemplating on that person's voice and telling someone about it, am I committing Vaishnava practice? Krishna is saying that that person's still a devotee.
By bringing the issue up with them?
Yeah. No,
not at all.
Either.
Sorry? Either
with them or with the management.
Not at all. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says you can even do this with your guru. You can even tell your guru, I think what you've done is wrong. You can bring up this principle if it's something that has been insulting or damaging or incorrect or violating the principles. Again, we need to understand all of these texts in context. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says if you notice your guru like having a chicken burger, right, or something, right? If you notice that, you bring it up with them and you say, I'm sorry, Gurudev, but I think that was wrong. Or you say, I'm sorry, but I feel like that was not the appropriate thing to be done. Even with your guru, you can do that. If you have the freedom to do that with your guru, you definitely have the freedom to do that with others. The trick is to not do it offensively, right? So not to, again, not to tell your guru, oh, you know, I read in Leela-amrita that back in the day before you became a devotee, you used to smoke cigarettes. And then when you became a devotee, you struggled to give up cigarettes, right? Or something like that. You know what I mean? Or I heard that you used to, you know, really, really, I don't know. We can come up with all these theoretical. I heard you used to be a dolphin murderer, right? Or whatever, right? All of these different things, right? Bringing those up is offensive, but bringing up an actual issue that's really affecting you, or that's actually causing a problem, even up to the level of your guru, you can do that. What to speak then of other Vaishnavas?
Like, what if it's like, you know, like if someone does something wrong to you and you either speak to them or to management, you're like doing something positive about it. But if you just wanted to, like, let's say I come and tell you because you're my friend and you've got nothing to do with anything, but I am confiding in you, like, is that considered prajalpa aparad?
I think that one's a bit more complex. I think it's a bit of a I think it really depends contextually. If you're going to somebody to ask, is this actually a principle? Is this actually a principle, right? Is this actually a something that's bad that's happened, right? If you're doing it in that sense to try and get like a second opinion, I can't imagine that being too bad. But if you're doing it in the sense of being, how do I put it? If you do it in the sense of again, of dredging things up just to attack them, that's different, right? But I think you also have to be human and express your, you know what I mean? You have to express what you're thinking. You have to try to understand it.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely fine to bring the things up. Again, that principle again is more about stuff that isn't relevant to your current well-being, if you get what I mean. I don't really understand your question, Alex.
Yeah, I was just using the first example that came to mind, but it's like the sin it's a sin that happened like 20 years ago, but it's still having an effect on someone now, and things could be done to rectify it, but you're not being done. So you know what I mean? So that
would be an example of something that's affecting you now, right? I now get your question.
Yeah.
That's something that's still perpetually affecting someone and therefore should be addressed.
Yeah.
Right? Like if it's perpetually affecting someone, then that's not left in the past, right? And it's not even that what's covered in this text is necessarily things that are left in the past, right? It's also speaking about things that happen now, but they just don't matter. And it's like one hiccup, you know what I mean? It's like one hiccup, you notice somebody does some small hiccup, they keep on going, they rectify themselves, etc., etc. Rectification is central to this. If it's not rectified, it's still an issue, right? Again, that's why our acharyas, they mention rectification has to happen. There has to be remorse and rectification. If there is remorse and rectification, then we look past it, right? Okay, there's actually a whole lot more to discuss with that text. As I said, I'm only going to touch on a few points because I realize we just won't have time to go through all the nuances of this text. Next week, we will discuss this text in much more detail, and then we'll finish chapter 9. When we go into further detail, this text will make more sense. And we'll also get to discuss some really creative different ways that this text has been interpreted. I actually think it's a really exciting text to discuss because the level of creativity that the different commentators have, I think it's one of the most creative texts in terms of just really, really cool different readings. And it's probably better to do it at the beginning of the class when our minds are fresh. Yeah, so probably all worked out for the best. If there aren't any other questions, the homework is, how far into chapter 10 did I tell you to go last week?
That's 10 or 11, like Chaturshloki.
Yeah, okay. If you finish the Chaturshloki, then read from wherever I told you, which I think was text 11, no, 14. It was text 14, I'm pretty sure. Read from text 15 to 30. 15 to 30 is this week's homework of chapter 10. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, sorry, today was a bit of an info dump one, but that always happens whenever we miss a session. I have to catch up a bit. So a bit philosophically heavy. If you have any questions, please shoot in the WhatsApp group. I don't think I've sent the girls the shloka list, have I? I'll send that right now as I finish this class.
You have it.
You have it?
The memorization list?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have it.
Oh, okay, you have it? Okay, Jai. Okay. But yeah, no. What to do? We had to catch up, so it was just 2 hours of me talking today. I'll see you all next week, and we will conclude chapter 9. Okay? Srimad Bhagavad-gītā ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, Hare Krishna. See you all next week.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.